Welcome to Season 2 of Coming Home to Ourselves, where we aim to bridge the gap between the sacred and modern day responsibilities, barriers, and life. I am Denise Alyssa, your host, channel, mystic, and guide, and I aim to empower you to become your own self-healer and an embodied co-creator of your life, supporting you in shedding what no longer serves and aligning you with your most authentic and connected version of self. Please note that I am not a medical professional and nothing said in this podcast should be misconstrued as medical advice or replacement of such. If you'd like to know more about my background, training, or the workshops, ceremonies, or other work I offer, please visit www.denisealyssa.com. Hi, friends. Welcome to the Coming Home to Ourselves podcast. I am so excited to have our two guests here today, Elinor, Moshe and Daniel Darman, who are co-founders of Truth of You. So, you guys, I really loved pieces of your stories. Here on the Coming Home to Ourselves podcast, we love to discuss kind of what made us aware of the fact that we were living outside of alignment with ourselves and what really brought us back into that. And I know that that's not always an easy journey. Sometimes it is kind of a slower, long process, and other times it's like this really deep tower moment. And Elinor, it sounds like yours was a pretty big tower moment, if I understood correctly. But it sounds like you guys both had some crumbling of sorts of like the value systems that you were living by. And these value systems were creating significant rifts in between like your internal and external world. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that because Elinor, especially from what I've heard from you, it sounds like you have had a really true and authentic version of coming home to yourself. And I think you both have. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Of course, thank you for having us. And it's incredible how the concept of home changes as you walk the path. Home is the physical space we have together. It is how we feel when we're together. It is being able to locate yourself within yourself. And none of these things existed in our reality 2, 3 years ago until, for me, as you correctly said, it was a tower moment when I realized that I have been nothing but my mother's daughter for my whole life. And the success that was born from that was meant to be the masking, but it became the suffocation. It was, sorry, not the masking, it was the masking, but it was meant to provide me with everything that I thought it would, the freedom, the truth, the love, what I was really aspiring for. And I had the successful career, but that run was for only 2 years. And when things started crumbling away, and I was not aware of that over 2 years, it led to that pinnacle moment of realizing that I don't even exist in my own reality, not personally and not professionally. Yet people would have keeled over to be in my position and to have the opportunities that I had. But beneath the surface, the rift was just getting so immense, and there was this constant splitting off of different aspects from one to another, and then trying to maintain this sense of self when everything else was trying to reinforce that just grew so heavy, and that chasm led to that tower moment, that soul, that crying from soul level that I told myself that this can't be it, and this is not me, and I did not know how to find my way out of this, but I certainly knew that I would this time round. But walking down the path, it really allowed me to realize that how many of these false belief systems, adherence to false authorities, and compliance to disempowering value systems had such a hidden cost that shelved my body, shelved my mind, and definitely shelved spirit. And that's also part of my lot in life is it was set up this way to find my way back to spirit, back to body as well. But when it's all that you know and going into this liminal state for quite a long period of time and not being able to locate yourself, not being able to present yourself to the world, and being in that state for a few years does definitely come with its challenges. But then you get to those moments where you breathe your first breath or second first breath as your own. You realize how powerful you actually are when you're setting intentions and they manifest quicker, or they manifest in a way maybe not quicker. Speed is not the measure, but the heart creates this heat, and you know that it's aligned because the heart's online with it. And being able to start landing in yourself and even just realizing that you don't know who you are at all is a big part of knowing yourself as well. It's sitting in that void space, which is also a part of us. So it was the second tower moment. The first one for me came in 2021. That was more to do with the external world, which definitely threw me off and threw me out. And I'm like, okay, now I know the truth kind of thing. But it's like, no, no, that was just a pre-show. The real story started coming later on, and it offered so much because the conscious forces for me had fried themselves, and that's where the unconscious forces definitely came to aid.
I love that. Thank you. I love so much of what you just said, but I really want to commend you for honoring that process within yourself and for allowing yourself, for having the courage, really, that deep inner courage and inner knowing to trust that you, as such a successful person, were meant to leave what you were doing, right? I think that we see over and over again people who reach this really high success rate and then feel like they have to just do whatever they can to maintain that and completely abandon themselves in order to do it. And in this society, like the way that we are raised in this modern world, that is one of the greatest acts of courage, in my opinion, to really step away from that narrative and to trust yourself to catch you. As I'm having this like vision of you just like falling, free falling from this idea of success in the modern world and trusting yourself to catch yourself, to land on both feet, to pick yourself up, to know that that is not the measure of success that you want to live by and that you still will be successful. Yeah,
I
I love
remember
that.
at the start, it was when I started spinning, I would of course call Daniel as a best friend, and he was my guide and still is my guide. His ability to play with perspectives is phenomenal. And I journaled this, but he said the hardest thing to commit is identity suicide and let go of everything that you don't know what you're holding on to. And I remember saying, like, oh, I'm not holding on to anything. I'm not attached to anything. What do you mean? I'm this. I built this. This was me. No, no, I was not. And no, that was not my identity. That was still an external thing. So going down a path that ultimately is scary and is, ridden with fear because of what everyone else around you is trying to reinforce for their own reality is a form of, yeah, identity suicide. So thank you for your comment.
Not only that, but you're walking away from everything that everyone around you deems as important. So that's such a great way of putting it, identity suicide. And I love that you had Daniel in your life to kind of, reel you back in and say, hey, you think you're not holding on to anything, but like, let me tell you, you
Yeah.
are.
Wait, there's so much
That's what
more
a good friend
attachments.
is.
Yeah,
That's what a good friend
absolutely.
does. But yeah, I mean, it must have taken so much courage to also just, you said you were always your mother's daughter. So I can only assume that your mother had some high standards in regards to success and, or some, at least some big ideas in regards to success. And so not only are you, committing identity suicide, like you said, and completely shifting the, the idea of who you are, but you're also walking away from what everybody else told you that you needed to be. And I think that takes guts and grit and courage. So I really commend you for taking those steps. And I'm having this moment of feeling so grateful for having this podcast and being able to connect with people like you, because there are a lot of us out there who have this courage and who take these steps, but we're spread out, and being able to connect with people on this level, I think is such a privilege and a gift to be able to have these conversations with people like you who are taking these steps, and to use that to inspire other people and to shift the narrative a little bit, that you don't have to just follow the path that was laid out for you or that was forced upon you. And, you can step off of it. So, yeah. And now,
When you
Daniel, I think
realize
you,
you're,
oh,
yeah, just one thing and then go to now, but when you
please
realize you're
do.
on the wrong path in one arena, then it spills over into other areas. And that is where, the deep transformation starts unraveling itself. So yeah, thank you for your comment. That's all for me for now.
Thank you, Elinor. No, thank you. I love where these dialogues go, and never feel like you have to cut yourself short, because so many like valuable gifts just get woven through these kinds of conversations. So thank you for sharing. And Daniel, I'd love to hear a little bit about yours, because I know that yours was kind of a slower, you referred to it as a slower burn, and I loved that. And you referenced how some of your pieces really do go back to childhood and linking some connections, and you navigated some health challenges of your own that I know overlap with a lot of my listeners and with my own health challenges. And so I'd love, for myself and for the listeners, to be able to hear a little bit more about, who are you today, and what did it take to kind of get there? What shifts did you have to make? And you really connected some deep dots for yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. And I'll start by saying my story is not like Eleanor's, with all the success and the glamour on the outside and the hollowing of the inside. Mine was more of just the hollowing throughout. And so I'll start with where I am now, because it's sort of figuring out who I am, and who I became. Through, as Eleanor mentioned, the identity suicide. That was one that I was always essentially committing throughout life in pieces, and it was one that was ultimately costing my soul, my spirit, my essence, whatever it is. And what I love about the podcast and the idea of the journey home is that it fundamentally is trying to anchor something fundamental of our roots, where we come from, where we are always safe, and where is always available to us as well. And I've realized that my journey, and I think everyone's journey in some respects, is always looking for that. Because even the idea of being able to find home in the literal sense has also been one that hasn't um, been available to me in a very in a way that makes me feel safe to explore and understand myself as well. But in the deeply symbolic sense, it's also incredibly pertinent as well to all seekers, especially when they need to find their sense of grounding, because that's something that I've come to realize using a variety of tools that both we offer and we've explored as well. That a lot of where I am and how I came to go through my own challenges, yes, there was a lot of childhood pieces, but there were even past life elements as well that I brought
Yeah.
in, a template for my spirit as well. And that already came from one of a deep sense of wounding, of belief in myself. And, we, as we do this work as well, like exploring the past lives and even beginning to understand how the soul's journey it really is eternal and never ending. But the idea is that we go through the highs, we go through the lows to be able to be ourselves and express ourselves. It's like a tree or a plant, or think of a rose having to live through all the seasons, and there's seasons it will thrive and there are seasons it will
Yes.
suffer. And cyclical thinking is something I've had to come into a deep understanding of, to even begin to not only understand myself, but others as well, because we all have our unique strengths and challenges as well. And mine is, as I'm coming into understanding now, it is a deep sensitivity emotionally, particularly with regards to, the heart and connecting to spirit too. And it's one that I chose this life. And the idea of choosing this life as well is one I don't want to overlook as well, because even the idea of consent at the soul level is not necessarily consent at the ego level. So
Yeah.
even the soul might turn around and say, well, this is what I want to experience. There are situations here that no ego would ever want to choose. And I do want
Yeah.
to respect the fact that it it isn't always an easy ride. for the ego who has to live through the soul's choices. But I basically set up this life in a way that would further disconnect and further limit my availability to that emotional resonance. And, the first place we look to is the parents. You watch the movies and the psychiatrist is always trying to psychoanalyze the child's relationship to mother and father. Look at Freud, for example. Even though it's very contentious in the way he approaches these things, I do think that his work in psychology, it did understand the fact that parents play an enormous role as well for how we even begin to relate to ourselves.
Yeah.
But, I was given the standard scripts and the models that, most people tend to get given, but they were highly disharmonic to my needs. And that was very difficult for me because society didn't even have the opportunity to explore the fact that even the family we grow up in and the society we grow up in might not resonate with our deeper needs as well. So I became obese, I became a chronic nail biter, and even had difficulty socializing, and no one even understood. No one even began to understand where I was at or gave me the space emotionally, which I needed more than ever. But because my soul also didn't want to put this pressure or this expectation on others, I knew that I was doing it on my own. I knew that it was my responsibility at some level. Basically, at 18, I had, well, I suppose you could call it its own tower moment where I had a complete physical and emotional collapse. And I was a high achiever in school and basically had to leave it all behind. No one knew what was happening. I certainly didn't. I couldn't feel into my emotions at that stage. All I knew is I couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't keep my head up in class. So after a whole bunch of tests, they basically slapped on this label called chronic fatigue syndrome, or more commonly known today as MECFS. And that was it. It's like, go see a psychologist and try and do exercise. And I spent most of my adult life until even the last few years really just attempting to live with it because I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And then, as I met Elinor and we've been doing this work, I realized the importance of even understanding not just who we are, but what we are as well. And, as Elinor alluded to, the heart space, really for me, it was not just about connecting to heart. It was really about the synthesis between, the Trinity, the heart with the feelings and that connection to something deeper, the head of even being able to think correctly as well. And then ultimately the body and making sure you're doing the right things, because we can feel the right things and then lack the action. It's a good idea to want to lose weight and get healthy until you don't get off the couch. It's great to understand mentally the idea of, what we're here to do and understand how reality works. But if you're not connecting to it emotionally, what's the point? And so really, it's just been the coming together.
Interject. I just want to share, especially for some of our listeners who are probably very deep in that space right now of, it's great to think that you should lose some weight, but you can't get off the couch. Or it's great to, there's, especially through the medical system, there can be a lot of shaming depending on the level of education of these conditions that your medical provider has. And you've already touched on a few that I know you have now evolved out of, but are so harmful that some of our listeners are still hearing all the time from some of their medical providers. So things like exercise for chronic fatigue syndrome is so dangerous, right? And some doctors are still recommending exercise therapy or graded therapy, exercise therapy. And, we know now that that's a really harmful thing to suggest. And then same with like, oh, maybe I could lose some weight if I could just get off the couch, but I can't get off the couch. Like, it's not that simple, right? And many people are living with so many more barriers to that. And I think you were as well. And you did end up getting to make a lot of those connections for yourself and to do a lot of that work for yourself. But I'm going to come back to you. But for our listeners listening who, maybe are really deep in that right now, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't kind of overlook that side of things within this dialogue, because I think that's a dangerous thing to do, because a lot of them are already getting that really heavy, shameful narrative from some of the professionals that are supposed to be helping them. So yeah,
And I
thanks
had
for
that
sharing.
too, and I understand. And
Yeah.
in my own case, it was coming back to the body and recognizing how much tension and stress that the nervous system had carried, and it was keeping the nervous system locked up in a way that took so much willpower to overcome, that how can you be anything but exhausted?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You're literally stuck in survival, right? And so it looks on the outside like you're doing nothing. And internally, your your body has been wired to survive. And you can only do that for so long, right? When those needs are going unmet.
I would say, like, at least in my case, it's not just being or becoming wired to, it's also carrying this weight, this non-physical weight throughout the nervous system as well. So yeah, on the outside, it looks like, I wasn't moving, I wasn't doing anything. But on the inside, you are so tense, you're so stressed,
Yeah.
everything is working so hard on itself in a conflicting sense that there's no energy left. It's like
Yeah.
rearranging your house all day and you're like, why am I exhausted? Nothing happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. So how did you get there? I love that you referenced some past lives. I have a lot of past life stuff in this life as well that I have had to explore and move through. And I also really love something that you said about how sometimes our soul chooses this path for this life, or certain circumstances for this lifetime, because, you know, the way I see it is that our bodies have a physical lifetime, this lifetime. Our souls do not. That's like one chapter, that's one season for them, right? And then they continue. So for them, they're never ending. And so for us in this physical body, that's why some of these things can feel so challenging and so detrimental. But our soul's evolutionary process has required them to choose human for some reason, right? For whatever our personal soul is looking to gain and to learn through this lifetime, they've chosen this body, this human life to help them get there. And when you said, like, sometimes our soul chooses something that our ego just really doesn't want to live through, I had this like flash of something that I was recently experiencing in my life. So I am at times I use a wheelchair for like outings because my health conditions, I had a relapse and I'm still working through some of my health conditions. So I was doing a lot of energy work and some past life work and some soul work, and I kept coming up against this wheelchair idea. And this was before I had it yet. And I was like, my human self, my ego was convinced, like, if I just do enough energy work, I can get out of having to get this wheelchair. Right? And my soul kept coming back in, and no matter what I tried to do, it would still show me in a wheelchair. And I finally had to accept that, maybe this is not forever in this lifetime. And maybe this is just one period of this lifetime, maybe even one season for a human life, right? But for whatever reason, this wheelchair is part of my soul's plan. This is something I'm not getting out of, right?
Mm.
Through all of the energy work, all of the soul work that I can do, my soul keeps coming in and telling and showing me myself in a wheelchair. This is the next step, whether my human body likes it or not, whether this is something I want to experience or not. So I love that you identified that for yourself, that like, yeah, damn, like this sucks. Like this my human self, my ego self, like does not want to experience this or to move through this. And man, does my soul ever want me to.
And can I add on that as well? Like when Elinor
Please.
mentioned, her lot in life, that's something we talk about a lot now, is actually just meeting the soul and the ego where they both are, because
Yeah.
it's so easy to go, it's very easy to bypass the needs of the ego as well, and just say, well, I want to just do the work and become enlightened and life will be easy. And it doesn't work like that. I know in
No.
our case, it really is sort of a rubber banding effect, and you have to meet yourself where you're at critically and painfully too, in some cases as well, to be able to begin the healing process to move forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I agree.
I think it's interesting though that you mentioned essentially what we're alluding to is karma as well.
Yeah.
And because that's another part as well. It's, there are lives that, you do one side, the pendulum's going to swing the other way, and you're going to experience the other side of it as well. And the human is quite finite and limited into what it can do as well, even though there are deeper levels of, of healing, change, and manifestation we can do. There are some things that we just don't have the capacity to do. An animal just simply doesn't have the capacity for the level of self-awareness that a human does, even though they could evolve into it one day.
Yeah, and I love what you said about how you think that you're just going to evolve and awaken and then you're going to be enlightened and life's going to be easy, and how that's just not how it works. And I agree, because I don't think it ever ends. Right? And that's what I try to tell people is like, don't feel like you have to rush this. You're allowed to enjoy your human life as you continue through this soul evolution, as you continue your awakening process. You deserve to live a human life that you are enjoying, and to use that to your advantage, and to, again, you put it so perfectly, meet your soul and your ego. I refer to it as my human self, but meet your body and your soul where you're at, because especially now, like, we're not getting enlightened and going and living on a mountain in a cave where people like travel to see us because we're enlightened, and we're like sharing this knowledge and this healing with them. Like, I really do believe that at this stage in our human evolution, a lot of the spiritual lessons are how to live as a human, how to be in our bodies, how to be connected to ourselves, how to bring our soul self in and let it be woven through our lives, and how to connect with our higher heart and let it lead us, and how to have that mind-heart coherence so that you can make decisions with grace, you can make the choices that really serve you. And it's not going to be, blissful all the time, right? It's not going to be comfortable all the time. But we can get stuck in healing, where we just think, oh, we're just continuing our evolution and then it's going to be easy. And I just don't think that's the case. So slow it down, meet yourself where you're at, do it in the way that serves you now, and enjoy, have some fun. Be a human.
The challenge is that, again, as I mentioned, like the nervous system being dysregulated and carrying all of this extra invisible weight. There is some level of normality that can allow us to enjoy ourselves. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, a healthy man wants 1,000 things, but a sick man only wants one. It's the idea of understanding priorities as well. And
Yeah.
even just sickness and dysregulation can prevent the one thing that we are looking for, which is 1,000 ways to enjoy being a human.
So that, if it's okay with you, I'm going to let that weave us right into another thing that I want to hear from you guys, because when you live with that level of nervous system dysregulation, which, to be clear, I think most people do and are unaware of, right? And for some of us, it leads to tower moments, it leads to great illness, it leads to some kind of catalyst for change where we can step into trust in ourselves, but we have to do the work to get there. For other people, they continue to shove it down, and that's just how they live, right? And they're totally unaware that their nervous system is dysregulated, that they're living in fight flight, that they're always feeling a sense of urgency, that they never feel safe or calm, right? Because it's just normal for them. And the two of you speak to the ability to discern truth from illusion. And I think that nervous system regulation is a big piece of that, because how can you, if that's what's normal for you, then how do you know what is truth and what is illusion, right? So I'd love to hear from, both of you or one of you on how you feel about that, and how does that weave into nervous system regulation, or what has that journey been like for you? Because you obviously went from living outside of your own values and outside of alignment with your authentic self into this full embodiment of discerning truth from illusion, and that's what guides you.
Elinor, do you want to speak to this one
You
first?
can go first. Go.
Oh, how do I even begin on this one? Sorry, can you lead me in again? I just
Yeah,
had so many
so
things come to me.
that's okay. It's a big topic, and I know I wove through some big things. So take your time and go where it leads you. But the question was around discerning truth from illusion and conditioning.
Yeah.
And I led into that around nervous system regulation, because I think that most people today live with a certain chronic degree of nervous system dysregulation that they don't even necessarily know is there. And I think that that becomes a big hindrance to being able to discern truth and authenticity from illusion or conditioning.
Yeah, so I think the thing with truth itself is it depends how we even begin to construct it. There's the little t truth, a subjective interpretation to come to what we might call capital T truth, a more objective, unified understanding. I don't think anyone's going to sit there and say the force of gravity doesn't exist, but someone might say that your conclusions on a particular situation might be not in alignment with what everyone else thinks. But then I even want to go one level above that and say that there's also another type of truth that always sits between any duality construct as well. So really, to be able to understand truth from illusion requires going into that in-between space to be able to understand things at the internal level and at a personal level, being able to understand it at the external and the collective and objective levels, and then being able to reconcile and tie them in together ultimately to see it for what it is, because truth simply is that which is. And we have objective parts of ourselves as we see ourselves, but we might say that's the way the physical body works. It's mechanistic. It has processes. It has systems like a computer, for example. But we're more of a bio machine that also responds to other stimuli as well, and it can't be reduced to just a machine. But then we have our internal selves and our connection to source, and this highly subjective view to see the world as well. And this is where I would say, if we look at like the brain, for example, the neocortex, has its left brain. So the other part of the brain, that its left side is logic, it's rationalizing and reasoning, and the right is abstraction, and it's understanding patterns and non-physical things as well. And that even beginning to understand truth requires us to keep going outside of whatever model we're trying to understand and acquire at some level the knowledge, the intuition, and even the raw embodied connection to be able to understand. And embodiment really is the final step when all three of them can match up as well. So it's a very truth itself is it's a very tricky thing to actually even begin to ground and center, because it itself it can appear like a construct as well through either our subjective experience or our attempt to objectify, but it's always in between anything or as I said, any dualistic mechanism. And so illusion really is nothing more than inconsistency across the models.
Thank you. And now, that was very conceptual. And Elinor, I have a sense, correct me if I'm wrong, that your version of this might come a little bit more from lived experience, from stepping into your sort of more authentic path in such a sudden transition, right? Because yours was so sudden. So, am I right on that? Yeah.
Definitely. No, absolutely. And it took a lot of excavation into your belief systems to really understand, the things that I'm believing today, what are they foundationed on? And when you start the forensic or the autopsy, the belief autopsy, as we've spoken about this week with Daniel, that when it's not foundationed on love and truth, capital L and capital T, ideally, one and the same, really, then how can it be good for you? How can it be, what will allow you to fully experience yourself? So when you start tracing the belief behind the belief behind the belief, and that may lead you into a cosmic adventure just to find part of the route or the top of the route to lead you into deeper paths. That's when you start realizing that so much of what we're living out and carrying today, you find it in one arena, it will then mirror into another, and the pattern repeats. And that's what the pattern does, it repeats. Otherwise, it's not a pattern. So, doing that shadow work at the start, at least for me, it was with the mental body, helped me realize that, hang on, how could any of this possibly have worked for me in the first place? Look at where it was birthed. Look at what maintained it. Look at the structures that ensured that it kept it in place. They are antithetical to what it means to experience the truth of ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love you just mentioned your belief autopsy. And I can picture that. I feel like I've done it, but I've never worded it in that way. And I'd love for you to share more if
Yeah,
you're open to it.
we're in the process of writing our book this week and the week before, and it's really trying to get, the sharp words that try and explain, shadow work can be interpreted many different ways, but it
Yeah.
really is looking at a belief system that inherently has no life in it and seeking to understand, okay, what happened here? Why was this the case? And yes, you do need to look backwards at some point so you don't repeat it. Because, when Daniel was channeling it, the question came through, how do you want to return your soul at the end of this lifetime? Maybe not returning the soul is the right term, but, we've been given it in a less than optimal condition. It's come with many fractures and wounding and scarring, and it's come with its own damage. It's like getting a beaten up car. The next character that's going to have this soul is not one that ultimately we want for it to repeat what we have experienced. We want to break cycles at this level, but it also needs to happen at a much larger game as well. So when we look at it from that perspective, it's seeking to understand, why did I even come into this lifetime with this belief system? How was it maintained? And, if it's dead and dusted at this level, then how can we make sure that it does not repeat itself on any other levels? And this is a lifetime's worth of work. This by no means is a weekend retreat or anything like that.
Yeah.
This is an invitation to go far and wide and to places that I didn't even know existed until a couple of years back. I only ever knew the character of Elinor, and that's it. And this reality in this 3D plane. So it is, yeah, like doing an autopsy. And when you realize that that's what you're doing, it's like, why am I carrying this around and expecting it to be full of life, full of love, full of everything that I've ever wanted? It's dead. It's not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that idea that, I've always, even from a young age, I had this sense that I don't want to repeat this. I don't want to repeat this life, and I came up against some really significant challenges earlier in life, in childhood and adolescence, that I they almost ended me right there. And I had this sense of, I do not want to do this again. So I am going to do this now. Like, I am going to see this through because if I have to come back and do this all over again, like, fuck that. Like, this is where I've been, no, I don't want to do this again. So, and that was really like young in my life when I didn't have the education, the understanding on a soul level that I do now. I wasn't exposed to any kind of discussion around our soul or a soul's evolution or reincarnation or this continuous growth. I was raised in a way of like, what you see is what is there, and if you don't see it, it's not there, and like this is just, typical modern day life, right? And I just had this knowing that if I don't persevere, if I don't figure out how to get out of this loop in this life, I'm going to come back and do it again. And no, I don't want to do that. So I love that. I love that you shared that, and that you've really stepped into that, but that both of you have really stepped into that deep inner knowing that you're not interested in, repeating the same outworn, outdated cycles that didn't serve you in this life and are certainly not going to serve you in the next. And it sounds like you're, kind of ready to embrace what life brings so that you can move through this soul evolution for yourself.
And I'd say
Yeah.
it's not just about not wanting to repeat, like the way I perceive it, it's not just about repeating. The continuation of our experience is eternal. And so it's like playing Super Mario and then you fall down a pit and die, and then you're back at the start again. We can look at that as repeating, but we could also see it as just it's the same game that you're just continuing to experience as well.
Yeah.
But even the ability to say put that game down and play something else or stop playing games altogether is still that continuation of the one eternal experience. And that's how we came into the awareness and realization of the deeper layers that actually, they get entrenched in paradigms and belief systems as well, that the energy does carry over between lifetimes as well, in a way that just doing some affirmations in the morning isn't going to make you manifest your dream job. It's not
Yeah.
as simple as that when there's deeper layers to it as well.
Yeah.
Which is why I do work in the conceptual and the abstract a lot, because I understand that principality is one that echoes throughout the dimensions
I
of our
agree.
awareness.
And I value having both perspectives. I really valued your more conceptual approach to this because I think it's a wider lens that can reach different people across different ways of being, right? Different people at very different levels, and I value that. And I understand that for a lot of our listeners, it's beyond their scope at this time. And so I love having also that lived experience. And this is what it meant for me. This is how I put it into place. And this is what it changed in my life, to really bring in that lived experience lens that I think there's so much value for both, right?
Mm.
And when that conceptual lens and that lived experience lens gets woven together, I mean, that's probably why you guys make such a great team, right? Because I think both are really needed. You have to meet people where they're at right now. And without understanding that broader conceptual lens, then you don't even really necessarily experience, like, understand your own lived experience, let alone somebody else's, right? So I really think that you need both. So I really value that you both shared kind of in different ways to bring that together for meeting our listeners where they're at, right? For the different levels that they'll be at right now as they're listening to this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of like being able to subjectively perceive the objective parts of your experience in your body and how you work. As I said, like trying to objectify the way the nervous system works or the endocrine system, but then attempting to, objectively rationalize your own subjective experience to make sure we don't fall into, traps, pits, and belief systems that lead us away from understanding a more objective reality as well. And it's this beautiful, intricate dance between both of them that that I've found personally brings being incarnated to life at all.
Thank you for that. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I would love to hear a little bit more about your perspectives of reclaiming masculine and feminine energies and that divine feminine and divine masculine, and how that gets woven throughout your work, right? And throughout your work, and also throughout your own healing processes. And for our listeners, again, I just want to reiterate that the divine masculine and divine feminine, these are energies that live within every single one of us. So this is not a gender-based thing. Every one of us has a divine masculine and a divine feminine inside of us. And it's of my belief that while we can really lean into one or the other at different times in our lives, the beauty is having those two energies work harmoniously and to be able to lean into which one serves you at any given time. And when you have a really distorted picture of the masculine or the feminine, which I think is what a lot of us are brought up with, then we can really struggle to connect with those energies in harmonious ways that really serve us. So I know that that's something you guys like to discuss, and I'd love to hear.
Of course. Well, we both found ourselves living on our inferior functions. And not even having the concept of the other, like the feminine power for me was not even in the frame. And how I perceived that was always as something weak, something as irrelevant. No, I'm going to hustle my way through this and I have to be productive. And all my worth was tied to performative actions and coming from a place of always needing to prove, needing to always have something external to myself. Because I didn't know what the feminine even was until I started on this path. But we understand the masculine as the doing, the drive, the warrior. This is the exertion energy. But what I wasn't connecting with was, where's that drive coming from and is it working through us correctly? Because we have an intuitive understanding of the masculine. We see it around ourselves often, also with a lot of distortions. But we don't have that for the feminine. And it was being on the path and is being on the path. This lifetime for me is a lot about the feminine reclamation, is if what we're doing on the outside is fulfilling us on the inside. And without the two, it can be hollow. It is, that sense of feeling incomplete because the feminine also sustains the masculine. So you see people with a lot of burnout or they crash or 2 years they're peaking like I had and then it's done kind of thing. It's like that's not how the energy works. Like the universe doesn't run out of energy, then how come we are? So for us it was working, we lost more than half of who we are and our dominant disposition and expressing that and working on these inferior functions. And when we lose that dominant expression, we're losing, how much we can actually be in the world. For the feminine, for me, it was losing touch with the body and the emotions. And it's just constantly chasing the wrong thing out of the wrong, emotional state or the sense of being. And it was not something, some people do come to this reclamation themselves. But for us, it was not set up that way. We needed each other in order to allow the nervous system to start, rewiring. I softened only because of Daniel. I would not have done that by myself. This was not energy that I could necessarily come into by myself without having that feedback loop of the other. And Daniel can speak to his own experience, but so many parts finally allowed themselves to relax, to soften, and to understand that power isn't something that is demonstrated, it's not performed. It exists on much deeper levels. It has been and is a phenomenal journey, and there is still so much for me to learn about the feminine. I do not sit here and claim that I have a deep understanding or a full grasp. It is something so broad, so deep, so vast that it's hard to put into words. But that's my first take.
I think you did put that into words really beautifully. I think it is a very challenging thing to put into human language, right? And I love how you shared that you could not have leaned into your softness without Daniel coming in and having that feedback loop for you. And I am, making an assumption here of kind of holding that energetic space for you, because how I see the masculine and feminine when they are both truly in their power and in balance, it invites the other to truly step into theirs, right? So if you have somebody who is anchored into their divine, loving masculine, that higher self masculine energy, it gives this safety, this softness for the feminine to really sink into, and from there to really rise up from, right? And to really rise up into that divine feminine power, which I love that you identified. You felt that the feminine was like weak, right? Like that initially, right? You thought of like this feminine energy as kind of being like a weakness. And I think that's how most of us are kind of taught, right? That's kind of the narrative. And so I love that when that divine masculine is truly anchored into his like higher self, into his loving, energetic self, the softness and the expansion that offer, like this broad space for the feminine to kind of like land into softness and expand and then rise into her power. And I think that the same goes for the man. You need both, right? So, and again, I'm talking in energetic terms, but if you have somebody who's really anchored into their divine feminine, it creates this space for the divine masculine to rise into his true loving sense of power that is not the type of masculine power that we think of in current narrative, right? It's this all loving, protective, action oriented, but it has this softness. It has this love, this never ending love within it, right? That kind of comes out in everything that comes from it. And so when you can have both, either in harmony within yourself or in harmony within a relationship dynamic, the transformational space that opens and creates and holds each other in is miraculous. I think, I just think that opens up to miracles and to healing. And yeah, it's like this inevitable shift that will come, right? So yeah,
I
so
just want to
thank
add
you for
on to
that.
Maska, you summarized that beautifully. How society conditions women in that, the masculine is to provide, but they only look at that as
Yeah,
providing in the 3D. He needs to come with, you know, the stock standard starter pack to be a man in society. And that's
yeah,
so toxic, so distorted. That's a whole other episode. But what you just said, that, you know, the masculine in its divine form provides so much love. And that's like, I am so lucky to get to experience that with Daniel. But they are providing something that is beyond anything that can be born or manifest in the
yeah,
physical world. But from that, who you can become and what you can have down the line, that surpasses anything that,
yeah.
the standard, expectations that female have. Like the divine masculine does provide so much, and that part of them needs to be honored, because there are, beautiful men out there, there are amazing men out there, but when, women are so, the social engineering has just gotten them to want to, flat pack a man as to give me all of these things so I can keep up with the neighbors. It's fallen so far from grace and so far from truth of what the divine masculine truly is.
I agree. And I love that you didn't use the word tangible, but basically you were saying what the divine masculine is providing is far beyond what is tangible,
Mm.
right? And I love that. And I think that if the divine feminine is really anchored into that space of softness and embodied boundaries, that really feminine, all loving, all encompassing, while holding those all loving boundaries, it creates this space for the masculine to unburden himself, right? And that's what our society is missing in so many ways, is this opportunity for men to step into their divine masculine, or for anyone, I should say, to step into their divine masculine and unburden themselves and be held, right? Be held in safety to do that. And then that is what empowers that man or that person who is anchored into that divine masculine to really rise up into that power. And then from there, what they can do is like you said perfectly, surpasses anything that you could imagine. So when you have those two energies combined within yourself or within a partnership, and again, not like the the person who is male at birth or identified male at birth doesn't have to be the divine masculine in that relationship. Like they can be the divine feminine, you can be both. But when you have that beautiful combination in harmony, the how it allows you to rise, I think, is just incredible.
Yeah, so my experience, like what Elinor mentioned, like we both grew up and coming into adulthood living on our inferior function. As I said before, I'm a bit more emotionally sensitive than I thought I ever was. By the time I come to realize that, yet growing up in a family and a community I grew up in a household of women from a divorce household, and they were more in their masculine, I would say, than I was. And so it sort of had this inversion. And then looking out into culture itself, and what Elinor mentioned with the social engineering, you'll see it plastered everywhere. And it's not that I have an issue with the idea of women being supported to reach up high in positions of the corporate ladder, for example, which is it is a masculine type of work. To go outside, to do action out in the world, is masculine energy. And to support women in that space on its own, in principle, I don't have an issue with. But the thing is, what about supporting the men in their own feminine spaces? And there was just no real balance between the two. And that's why, again, I talk back to the idea of the dimensions of layers, like layers of abstraction, that we can then begin to understand the way, like archetypes, for example, can begin to even help us understand the dynamics of, well, what is masculinity and femininity? Because I was completely lost on what it even means to be a man, let alone a masculine man or a feminine man, or there was just so much confusion between it. So distilling and dispelling the inconsistencies or the illusions, as I mentioned before, is one that I had to do an extremely deep dive over this. And this is where, I use models, particularly in everything, really, to help ground me in understanding. For example, I don't know if most of your listeners have heard of the Kabbalion, but it's an attempt to map the totality of reality through models of understanding that the all is mind, and understanding that we're in direct connection to the universe, and principles of polarity. But the very final one is the one of gender. And my favorite model for gender is the symbol of the yin and the yang. And it's two opposing dualities of masculine and feminine, eternally imposing on each other and supporting each other and growing through each other. And it never ends. And so we look at yang as the white, it's light, it's daytime. It's, if you think astrology, the sun, even just look up in the sky, the sun represents the masculine because it provides the energy, it provides the life for us, where the feminine represents the dark. It represents what we might call passive, or might appear as inaction. But if we model this through, say, the growth of a tree, you might say the masculine is the phallic growth of the tree growing upwards, while the feminine is growing into the ground, planting the roots. And they both have an extremely complementary aspect to them. And just like men and women, we both have our complementary aspects to both of these. And as you mentioned before, men can lean into being the feminine one of the relationship, and women can lean into the masculine. It can work as long as the energies harmonize. But what I would say that I've seen personally in my experience is that, the man is set up to more often than not take on more of that masculine energy in the relationship, and the woman is invited to take on more of the feminine, generally speaking. That allows them to really lean into their dominant energy. And that's something that Elinor and I both identified very early on, that we were working on both of our inferior functions. And we've used that to help me learn how to become more masculine, and her how to connect more with her feminine as well.
And would you say, I think, because this is my opinion, but I haven't really deep dove this. This is mainly my lived experience and sort of the things that get channeled through me that have brought this masculine feminine interest to me, right? But would you say that, because you referenced that one person in the relationship can really lean into the masculine and one person in the relationship can really lean into the feminine, would you not say that sometimes that ebbs and flows?
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a living system.
Yeah.
Nothing is static you can quantify it through science and metrics, but at the end of the day, it's a dance. Yeah. Everything is moving. Everything is a dance. And there's some things that, Elinor will be 90% the masculine, and I'll be 10% the masculine and 90% the feminine. And then there's other areas. And it's understanding who you are and what works for you, and working with subjectivity within attempting to understand an objectified understanding of the duality of masculine and feminine. They're just energies, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think understanding your partner, right, or who you're doing this dance with, right? When I view masculine and feminine energies, I'm really viewing it as like they're doing a dance. And so when you know your dance partner well and you know where do they need to lean into their feminine, where do they need to lean into their masculine, what supports them in really thriving, when you can kind of take that step with them, right? And you're going to like shift in who's leading and who's following. But when you can really get into that flow, I think you can really create a lot of space for transformation and a lot of space for healing when you allow those shifts to happen and that flow to happen, so that I can kind of take a step into my masculine and allow and invite my partner to step into his feminine a little bit more, and then I can sense, oh, he really needs to step into his masculine a little bit more right now, and I can soften and I can step in a little bit to my feminine more in that divine way that allows him to really step into his masculine, right? And again, this is so far beyond the paradigms of, the man's the provider and the woman's the, stay-at-home mom. Like, and we don't even really live in that society anymore, right? I was just having this conversation the other day that we are really in a society now that is like, oh, you're a woman, so you can do it all and you should do it all. And we can't, right? Like it's not realistic for us to really do everything and thrive and have a thriving family unit when one person is stepping into doing every single thing. And I imagine Elinor can really speak to this with her experience, that it's very a narrative of, well, you're a woman, so you can work now. You can have a bank account now. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't that many generations ago when a woman couldn't even have a bank account, right? And so there's this idea now where a woman can do it all and she should. And that really forces us into our masculine in a way that does not serve us. It does not serve our relationships. It does not serve our children. It does not serve our health. And then we're asked to do both, right? And so I think when we can really have this dance of knowing who needs to lean into what when, and allowing ourselves to shift and flow with that, it can really create these like miraculous, like energetic portals, that you're now just in, and you get to experience everything that comes with that.
Absolutely. We're not meant to do things alone. That's not how it's set up. That hyper independence or the hyper vigilance is deeply rooted in traumatic responses to past experiences, this life or other. And it's more, it's for women, it's you get the boss babe title, you get applauded and whatnot. But if someone really connected, and do they love coming home alone? Do they love the aloneness so much? Is it really that worth it when your heart's online? If they tapped into the heart, is that really what they want? And if they've done that work and the heart still says, yes, I want to do it alone and I want to be a product of, a man-made world, then okay. But people haven't asked the heart. When the heart's not online, then yeah, especially as women, you get awarded. You get asked, how do you do it all? It's like you're dead inside. Is that the answer you
Yeah.
wanted? It doesn't, it's a deep part of the conditioning as well. And that's a big part of my life purpose, and maybe not, Daniel's to a certain extent, that we've both come in from isolated lives, or as our higher self says, solo existences,
Yeah.
and learning how to dance, learning how to co-create. This isn't a given. We don't see many models of conscious relating, not in the workplace, not in family, definitely not in families, and let
Yeah.
alone we don't see that. So
Yeah.
when we're ultimately, for some of us learning from this from scratch, it comes with its challenges, but we understand the context of which this is playing out in and what this is inviting us into, because we want to be, the models of this is how you consciously relate. And what comes from that is, again, more than a vision board or a 10-day money course or an affirmation in the morning and everything can provide. It doesn't even compare.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to clarify that at least from my perspective, I'm not speaking to the point that people have to do this within romantic relationships,
Mm.
right?
No, of
And
course not.
even with children, and because I referenced having a partner and kids, right? So, and that I can't do it all alone. And when I say that, I don't mean, oh, I have to be in romantic relationship to raise a healthy family. That's not what I mean. But we have to be in community. We have to be in relationship with one another in some way. And it doesn't have to come from one person or one romantic partner. It can come from a much, broader lens of community and whatever works for that person, right? So,
Absolutely. You see it in business partners as well.
yeah,
Like you go to some entrepreneur event and they're complaining about X person or this person or it's not working and they try to make it work. It's like,
yeah.
why? Yeah, this is clearly a trauma bond here. It's not going to work. And the community is something like you touched on. That's really what we're looking for. And Danielle and I don't have that. We really do not have that, and that's a byproduct of the old life that we've come from. It's like, how do you get to a point where you're in mid-30s and that doesn't exist?
Yeah,
That
I'm with
begets a lot
you.
of questions. But community is the word. We are meant to, this is how we used to live, that tribe mentality where lots of different functions were not carried for you, but you were supported. You truly felt supported, and that gave you more bandwidth to to explore, to go deep within. But when it all lands on one set of shoulders, then, as you said, it's we are so limited. We are so stunted from being able to access so many different parts of ourselves as well.
I love that question that you just raised that, how do you get into your mid 30s and not have a sense of community? How does that happen? And I think, if I can just ask you, because based on something else you said earlier was your you need to be watching how people relate to one another and to really feel deeply held and connected to, and that you certainly don't get that within families. And I was laughing because I can relate to that, and because I see that so much. And I think that from my perspective, we have kind of two paradigms going on. I guess three. There's probably people who are raised in really well connected, loving families who connect to each other and see each other and feel each other and hold each other in that. I don't know them, but they probably exist. And
Neither do we.
so, right. So let's say there's three. That's one of them. And then we have, I think, the groups of people who are really still living in their conditioning. They're not even really aware that they're not connected to the people that they love. They they think that they love them because they're their family. They're supposed to love them. Do you know what I mean? Like this is just their conditioning. This is their beliefs. And they are led so strongly by their beliefs that they don't consider anything else. And then you have people like me, and probably it sounds like you, who say, hey, like I love you and I think you love me, but I feel super disconnected from you. What's going on? And then you become the black sheep of the family, right? And so from there, I think that those people are possibly the ones who reach their mid 30s and go, whoa, how do I not feel like I have a sense of community? Would you agree? Is that you? Like, do you?
Yeah, I mean, this feeds into the idea of even like attachment theory.
Yeah.
You've got secure attachment, you've got the avoidant attachment, and then you've got the anxious attachment. And these really show at some level the level of susceptibility we have to conditioning when we're young and how strongly we can hold on to it. That's one thing that Ella and I both identified, regarding our own childhood, is that we were primed at the soul level to take on beliefs like this that were not going to serve. So we weren't necessarily aligning with belief systems that were going to help us grow in the active sense, but grow in spite of it.
Yeah.
Once we could come into full awareness.
And kind of like bring in this new earth. You know what I mean? Like I think that there's a lot of us scattered throughout the world who we were born in going like questioning, hey, this doesn't really seem right, and I'm told that families are supposed to feel this way and act this way and whatever, but this doesn't resonate with what I'm experiencing, right? And maybe I'm seeing it on the outside, but internally, this is not, there's an incoherence here. And then we come up through this world, and our families have the choice. Are they going to evaluate those beliefs with us, or are they going to stay the same? And then we have the choice. Are we going to shove all of that deep inner knowing and our own internal experience down and swallow it until we're chronically ill? Or, or are we going to step out of that paradigm and speak our truth and share what we really feel that we know to be true? And that's not to say that the old way didn't work, or that the other way, I won't even call it the old way, that the other way doesn't work for some people. That's fine if that's what works for you. But I don't see it as the future of our planet. And I think that there's a lot of people like you who are, you know, I don't even want to use the term awake, but who think this way, who experience the world differently, who speak that truth, who aren't going to continue to shove it down to the point where like they're exploding inside and they can't even swallow it anymore because there's no room. Who are saying, hey, I don't think this doesn't work for me. And I don't think it's how it has to be. That's what I always go back to. And people in my life, they don't like it, right? And I'm always like, I just don't think that this is how it has to be. And the people around me are, they don't love that about me, but it's always coming up. And it comes from this genuine confusion within me of this is what I'm genuinely experiencing. And even though it's not maybe that obvious on the outside, how is it not obvious, right? It's so obvious. And I just don't think it needs to be this way. And then from there, they have the choice. Do they have the courage to explore those things, or do they not? And then I have the choice to, meet them where they are and love them there, and take the steps that I need to do to keep myself safe, to keep myself growing and evolving, to grow my family the way that I want to grow my family, so that they can thrive in this future world, because I don't think that our future world is that way. Right?
Yeah, I want to step back a little bit first. Even the idea, it's just of these distortions as well. Thinking of like a masculine and feminine lens, we look at like a masculine distortion to something like this, of maintaining these illusions, might be an outward facade. What Elinor mentioned before, putting it out there, everything seemed good on the outside. Where I would say like a feminine distortion for me that I struggled with was the idea of creating something good that wasn't there. And so I'd say that's it's a very internal distortion to say, no, things are good. I love my family, I love my life, all this. And it's like, that's actually not true. And then feeding into like what you're saying, like really, this is now getting into like reclamation and the idea of understanding the truth of it as well. And even knowing how to navigate that, even understanding, is it a masculine expression that might be incorrect, that you're trying to course correct, or a feminine one as well? I just thought I'd sneak that in there as well.
Thank you. I think it's both.
Generally it is, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Elinor, do you want to add anything?
No, I think the three tiers in which you stated, and I was thinking, the nature of this podcast is coming home to ourselves, and we do have an expectation that family's home, and it should be this and should be that, but sometimes the model is antithetical to who we are meant to express as. And there are many, maybe those in your audience as well, that they're the ones breaking into intergenerational patterns, and it ends with you. And so much of it, is born and stems from the concept of home. And we think that's where family is, but sometimes it is not. And that is one hell of a belief system to start pulling apart and putting back together. It can feel
Yeah.
so challenging to someone. And for some, of course, yes, on one level we chose this family, but sometimes that family doesn't uphold their end of the contract and things go pear-shaped. It's like a bad business deal. You know, when we're all standing at the outset, we all want it to go well. No one's standing at the start of a business deal shaking hands going, this is going to go up shit creek fast. But then it does. So it's no different from family, and there are lots of invisible attachments there that we carry that are, again, do not allow us to experience that sense of home where we actually live in our body with family that we choose as well. It's a sticky belief system. It's filled with minds, and if as Daniel was writing in our book, if you are one of the few that come from a conscious, nurturing, home that is, love and harmony and freedom at the core, then that is fantastic. Hopefully you're able to pass that on if someone chooses to have kids. But you may also know someone that doesn't come from, a family dynamic that, supports that. And I'll bring one more point. Like, we can go into so many different
I
aspects with
know.
this, but I was reading something where, when parents like disown their children, they get awarded and patted on the back. It's like, good for you. You deserve better as
Yeah.
the parent. But when the child goes and says, I'm taking a conscious break from them because of this is this, how dare you? You only have one set of parents. They're not going to be around forever. And then there's that meme on Instagram. Look, the most important phone call you'll ever have is from your mum or dad. You get guilted into that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's thick. It is a thick belief system out there with lots of distortions. But meeting individuals where they're at, as we were talking about beforehand, is primary to this instance.
And I do think that every generation has broken the cycles that they felt able to break at the time. Do you know what I mean? So I think we have this narrative right now that is like, oh, this generation is the cycle breakers, and that we're breaking the generational trauma ends with us. Like, no, I'm probably leaving my kids with trauma that I know nothing about, right? Like, and am I going to do my best not to do that? Yeah. I work really, really hard at making sure that I am aware of my child's unique needs and as an individual person, and that they're not just like an extension of me. They are their own unique person with their own unique needs that I might know nothing about, that I have to do the work to learn. And that just because they're my kid doesn't mean I just know that. You know what I mean? That's, you put labor and intention and consciousness into that. But I do also think that the people who came before us broke cycles that we know nothing about, right? So I don't think that it's just that, oh, this generation's come up and we're the cycle breakers and everybody else before us sucked, right? I think that we might not know anything about them. Sometimes we do, depending on your family dynamic and how much things are shared. But I do believe that a lot of people, not everyone, has done what they can to break the cycles that they can, right? And I love what you shared about, realizing that home is not always your family, and that journey of understanding can be such a hard and devastating journey to experience. And I've done a lot of labor in that for myself, and have reached a point where I really try to meet my parents where they're at. They do the best they can with the resources that they have. And I may not always like how they do it, or what they do, and what they choose to avoid or confront, and things like that, what they choose to heal. But I do believe that they're doing the best that they can with the resources and the understanding and the capacity that they have. And I do believe that they did the best that they could to break the cycles that they knew how to break, or that they were even aware of, right? And our society is changing faster than our generations can keep up with. So the cycles that they were trying to break back then probably felt so like probably felt just as important to them as it does to us now. But they can't predict how quickly and what's going to change in our society that's going to really like morph the things that maybe I did need that I didn't get, or you know what I mean? So I do think that it's worth saying that we're not the only cycle breakers. Like our
Of
generation is
course.
not the only.
No, of course, the men and women who broke their own boundaries back then, everything is um it's all valuable in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's just so much that we don't know about our parents, about their lived experience, about what they, had to overcome or had to come up against.
I will say though that I do think that the level of work that can be done it's contingent on their level of conscious connection to
Yeah.
deeper layers of themselves as well. Because I have seen some people that not only do not do their own internal work, but then they'll spew it out onto everyone around them.
Yeah.
So even if they create the same level of issues for one person around them, because they do it to so many people, they actually spread this type of
Yeah.
distortion, this non-physical sickness, and such as well. And this is really where we get into the nature of pathology.
I do
But
100% agree with you. So thanks for bringing that up as well, because
it's a conscious
that
choice.
level of consciousness has a big
Yep.
big factor, big role. Well, you guys, thank you for being here. I feel like there's so much more that we could dive into if we had the time, but I'd love to hear a little bit about sort of the work that you do. I just want to give you a chance to share with the listeners and for them to take home some tidbits of information of like you guys are writing a book and Elinor, you've written a few books. Daniel, too, have you
No,
also? No,
first time
okay,
author.
this is your first one. And you guys have a business together, and the work that you're doing really is creating ripples and shifts out into the world. I really believe, and I say this all the time, that as we heal ourselves, we heal the world, because that ripple effect is so profound, even if we don't necessarily see it in the moment. And again, that's a generational, the work we're doing now heals generations that come after us even, right? So I love the work that you guys are doing, and I'd love to hear a bit about it or a bit about the book you're writing if you'd like to share.
It's an ambitious title called The Truth of You, and with words like truth and you in the title, there is a lot that it, is to live up to. But it's an inquiry into what does it mean to experience the truth with a capital and the you, and offering, this book for who we were years back when things
Yeah.
just don't make sense anymore. And we, live the part that we're working on right now is the deceptive part. How many layers of belief system and control structures, family included, out there which prevent us from experiencing our truth. But then also taking that, as Daniel was talking about, the principle-based perspective of what does it mean to live in our truth and experience that. So it is an ambitious book. We are attempting to tackle very deep topics that give people the perspectives that we needed when we started on the journey that were constantly missing, or that weren't presented in a way that just cut through everything. And that's something that Daniel has always done so wonderfully. He's always been able to say the right thing at the right time, that it lands, to just let the paradigm crumble as it had to anyway. So that is a book, and education is a big part of what we want to be doing and are doing. We're relaunching our podcast and the book and whatnot, because conversations like these, there is a massive education gap in this space, and we're not here to yell it per se, but it's to be the quiet, the void that sits in between everything. So the work that we do energy mapping. So whether that's through soul contract, numerology, astrology, human design, or tarot, other divination tools to locate and give the blueprint. This is the baseline. This is what we're working towards. And journeying through different modalities. So QHHD being one of them, Daniel's certified, and being able to just lift the hood on the unconscious and go, right, what shit show's been created here, and how can we, lift those unconscious mountains in a very short period of time. I was speaking to someone who was saying that I have an appointment with a specialist to work on one micro issue and it costs this much. And they're happy to pay that, and they're happy to do that because that's what the conditioning says, that this is what you do. I have a micro problem,
Yeah.
I go to a micro specialist. But why don't you go to the ultimate specialist of you, which is the part of you that's just not incarnate here? It's your higher self, it's your spirit team, it's whoever comes to the party when you're in that trance state.
Yep.
And let's address everything and anything most prevalent at that moment. So
I love that.
QHHT is, working in those trance states, and whether it's theta healing or whatever it is that we do in that state is primary as well. So that is the work that we do at the moment. We practice a lot of things on each other. We develop and are developing lots of things in this space that allow people to have the direct experience of what it means to have the truth of you. We're not here to tell them what that is. That's antithetical to their being as well.
And can I add, that's also with the book, it's sort of the paradox of it as well. It's like you're reading a book called The Truth of You, and we're sort of going to tell you everything but the actual answer. It's one that's, yes, it's an inquiry into both truth and you, but it's also I argue I've had so many headaches over how much effort it is to try and even wrap your head around it, because it's on one part scientific and educational. At another level, it's economic and worldly. At another level, it's cosmic and universal. It talks to the hero's journey, and it's trying to synthesize every part of reality itself in a way that could, it's more than just the hero's journey, as Joseph Campbell wrote about. It's attempting to essentially map all parts of reality in a way that could be, I also want to say, practical to understand for the reader as well, because it's one that, Elinor and I both on our journey take very different approaches to ultimately come to the same conclusion, and that is that the truth is ultimately about you.
I love that, because I think that the only person who can truly understand the truth of themselves is that person, right? So it isn't up to you to give them those answers. It's up to, it's not even up to you, but what a gift you are giving to kind of lay the path to support them in even just finding the road to get there. And then from there, they are the only person who can really align with and identify what is truly right for them, or what truly aligns for them at any given time. And that is something that I speak about often, because I feel it leads into the safety within doing this work, or alternatively the lack of safety within doing this work. If you have somebody who is just telling you who you are, or who you meant to be, or the different things that come through, you need to learn how to discern that for yourself. Or each individual does. Obviously you already have. And I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm having like so many pieces, so many threads come through at the same time that I find I'm dropping some of them, because only one can come through at once.
This was such a gentle
Yeah.
conversation. You are such a gentle soul, and thank you for, the questions and the conversation. And if anything, it's to give permission to people, to allow them to explore this, and to know that they aren't alone in this space. There are people, there are, ways that they can access support that they may not have physically present with them right then and there, but it is there. So thank you for this curation and the space that you held, Denise. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. You seem like you guys just make such a great team. I love how each of your unique strengths and personalities and histories and stories come with you into the space, and how they're not only just like held by the other, but how both of yours weave in together to really create this dynamic whole. And I love that you guys found each other in regards to, you speak to like coming from families of origins that just didn't serve you, didn't align with where you're going, and feeling like alone, not having that sense of community. And so I just love that you have not only found each other, but have really supported each other in stepping into each of your fullness, right? Like there is room for all of you within this dynamic and this partnership and this business and relationship as well, and within this space here today. And I just love that. It's such a gift for you guys to have that, but it's also such a gift to the world to see that is possible, because it is, right? And I fully, wholeheartedly believe that it is. But again, that comes back to beliefs and conditioning, where we are led to believe that that is not possible, that we each have to sacrifice so much of ourselves to be in relationship and in community. And so I think to see people who are fully stepped into their wholeness and in partnership and relationship and having space for all of you within that is such a gift to the world, to be able to witness that and to be able to have a visual, a lived experience, perspective of this is possible, this exists.
Absolutely.
Maybe we were the last two that were ever going to believe something like
Yes.
that.
Well, that makes it even better.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm sure we have so much more that we could talk about, but I'm going to go ahead and close. Thank you. As always, I am trusting you to take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind. Please be sure to hydrate and care for yourself well, as any of the energetic transmissions, meditations, or self-healing prompts integrate into your system in the coming days or weeks. As with all the work that I do, I ask that this aligns for the highest and best of everyone involved, and I trust that you will only receive that which is in true alignment for you at this time. If this resonated with you, I invite you to consider giving back through your likes, ratings, comments, shares, or subscribes, as those help so much on these platforms. If you're ready to go deeper than what these platforms can provide, I offer ceremonies, workshops, guided practices, and more at www.denisealyssa.com. I look forward to connecting with you there.